Fantasy Fanfiction. Take Sharingan on a Great Voyage. Chapter 1. See Circle Calendar 1509. 11 years have passed since the public execution of Pirate King Gall D. Roger. The Pirate King, Gall D. Roger, who once owned everything in the world with fame, wealth, and power, left a sentence before his death that made people all over the world rush to the sea. Do you want my treasure? I can give it to you if you want it, go find it. I put everything there. So all the people began to set sail and sail into the Grand Line, and the world ushered in the era of great pirates. East Blue. The weakest ocean among the 4 oceans, but it is indeed the calmest ocean. After the Great Pirate Age began, people from all oceans rushed to the Grand Line to find the legendary One Piece who had everything and become the Pirate King. But East Blue, where Roger, the Pirate King, was born and many strong men were born, after the Great Pirate Era, the Grand Line became the pirate graveyard in people's mouths. Fewer and fewer pirates were able to enter the Grand Line, and the Grand Line gradually became a legend in people's mouths. One of the many islands dotted in the East Blue, a small village where life is peaceful and calm. But yesterday, a devil came to this village and made the village crazy. Men, women, and children in the whole village acted together to catch the little devil, parade him through the streets, and then tie him to a cross. Where is the person? Why did he disappear all of a sudden? Where did that kid with devil eyes go? Look carefully, it must be over here. Don't let him escape. If the monster escapes, our whole village will suffer. Don't worry, village chief, that guy can't run away. You're not in good health. Go back and rest first. The footsteps slowly dispersed in the chaos, and the person hiding upright on the eaves slowly breathed a sigh of relief. The person raised his head slightly, and a pair of strange blood-red eyes were revealed, which looked very bright in the dark alley without moonlight. It is particularly eerie and strange, like a devil coming out of hell, scanning the world with blood-red eyes. The blood-red eyes flickered slightly. If you look carefully, in the blood-red eyeballs, in addition to the black pupil in the middle, there is a round of black magatama around the periphery of the eyeballs, which makes the already weird eyes even more terrifying. Luo Yun raised his hand and touched these blood-red eyes. No, it should be said to be Sharingan. As a person who likes to watch anime, I don't know how many times I have watched Hokage. As Sharingan, one of the 3 major eye skills in Hokage, Luo Yun can be said to be very familiar. The first time I saw Luo Yun just recognized him. Why did my eyes turn into the Sharingan in Hokage? Luo Yun can say that when he was pushing down the tower, he saw a flash of lightning outside the window, and then he turned into light and came to a small village living in the ancient world. It's a pity that only 1 drop of blood is left in the crystal. When Luo Yun first discovered that he had a Sharingan, he couldn't help shouting with excitement and joy in his heart. Unfortunately, it attracted the surrounding residents. Then a sad story happened. These villagers regarded Luo Yun with blood-red eyes as a demon from hell, and wanted to capture him and parade him through the streets and dip him in a pig cage. Luo Yun immediately ran away, depressed in his heart. What the hell, the villagers in the Hokage world knew about ninjas no matter what, so why did they regard him as a devil? But in the process of being chased, Luo Yun ran all the way down the street and accidentally knocked over a stall. A newspaper flew towards him, and Luo Yun subconsciously caught it and took a look. Immediately, he stared at the sky speechlessly, wanting to cry but without tears. This was the world of One Piece for a long time. The newspaper clearly stated that Naval Headquarters captured a big pirate with a bounty of 700 million, and he was about to be executed at Marineford Square in Naval Headquarters. No need to read what comes next. Naval Headquarters. Pirates. Marineford. For a long time, he was not in the world of Hokage, but in the world of One Piece. I came to the world of One Piece with a pair of Sharingan. Before he could think about what was going on, more and more villagers were chasing after him. Luo Yun began a desperate escape journey. He was hunted down as soon as he crossed over. I am afraid there is no more unlucky traveler than him. Fortunately, he also has a pair of Sharingan, but the Sharingan ability of a single Magatama is not very strong. Not as good as a double Magatama and a triple Magatama, let alone as pervert as the Mangekyo Sharingan. But it is much stronger than ordinary ones. In Shan Magatama's Sharingan state, his strength is several times that of the original. He can clearly see the movements of an ant more than 10 meters away, and his insight ability can slow down his movements several times. What seemed to be extremely fast movements turned out to be extremely slow in his eyes. Relying on this pair of Sharingan, Luo Yun was able to avoid being overtaken by hundreds of villagers behind him and hid under the eaves of this alley. Seeing that the last villager had left, the footsteps dispersed, and Luo Yun, who was hiding on the eaves, jumped down lightly, found the direction, and ran towards the other end of the alley. This village cannot stay any longer. The villagers already know his identity. Even if he closes Sharingan, the villagers who know him will still capture him and parade him through the streets and dip him into a pig cage. There are only a few hundred villagers in this village, which is not very big. Luo Yun relied on Sharingan to be cautious and escaped from the village without any danger. When leaving, Luo Yun, who was growling with hunger, stole a chicken from a villager's house. Following the path, Luo Yun trotted all the way to the foot of the nearest hill next to the nearby village. Finding a big tree in a good location near a stream, Luo Yun handled the chicken with ease, then found a fragrant leaf to wrap the chicken in, wrapped it in yellow mud, and threw it into the fire to make a beggar's chicken. While the chicken was being cooked, Luo Yun sat on the root of a nearby tree and lit a fire before calming down and thinking carefully about his current situation. After experiencing the shock and confusion at the beginning of time travel, Luo Yun has now calmed down and accepted this fact. He didn't expect that such a time travel thing would happen to him one day. As for the reason behind this time travel, Luo Yun was too lazy to think about it, and there was no need to think about it. Instead of thinking about these messy, useless things, it is better to think about how to survive in this world. This is the problem before us. First of all, he is not in Hokage, but in One Piece. If he were not Hokage, the world of One Piece would be completely different. With the words of One Piece Roger after his death, the era of great pirates began. People rushed to the Grand Line to find the great secret treasure One Piece. The protagonist is Luffy, a rich second-generation passionate young man who doesn't want to inherit his grandfather and father's family fortune and starts his own business. For him now, he first needs to determine what year it is. If it was before Luffy went to sea, it would be great. If Luffy had already gone to sea at this time, it would be very embarrassing. Although he knew the direction of the story, it was of no use if he didn't have the strength. There are many powerful people in the world of pirates. Not only pirates and official forces, but also private forces have many hidden bosses. Fujitora and Green Bull are the two representatives. They are not famous at all, but they have admiral-level combat power. It's not scary to say it's scary. There are a lot of fools like Luffy. If they don't do this or that for you, they just start doing it. If they don't have the strength to make calculations, they are looking for death. He is not the main character Luffy. He fights monsters and upgrades all the way. He has gone from a newcomer to a strong player in just a few years. Even if he has 2 Sharingans, it still takes time to improve his strength. Only by determining what year he was in could he plan some things. There were currently 2 things in front of him, one was to determine the year, and the other was to become stronger. It's okay to make sure you are old enough. If you want to become stronger quickly, you must first find a famous teacher. Having a good master to guide you can avoid many detours. What do you want to say to master? Of course it would be best to find Pluton Rayleigh, who can still be among the top combatants without the ability of Devil Fruit. Conqueror's haki, physical skills, and swordsmanship are among the best in the world, and he has rich experience. You can see the results of Luffy after 2 years of training. Rayleigh is a very good teacher. But now Rayleigh is probably still working as a coder at Sabayati Archipelago. He goes to the casino when he has nothing to do and sells it to himself when he loses the bet. His current position is the East Blue, and he still doesn't know how far to go to the Grand Line, let alone the Sabayati Archipelago, which is in the middle. After thinking about it, he might as well forget it. Speaking of East Blue, I do have a good teacher, the equally legendary marine hero Monkey D. Garp. This old man was even more pervert, putting an end to the 2 pirate overlords who ruled the Grand Line, Kaido and Bigmom. Decades ago, he was Garp's younger brother. Without the ability of Devil Fruit, a pair of iron fists is invincible. If there is a perfect armament haki in the One Piece world, it is Garp. Taijutsu and haki are definitely at the top. If you don't look at it, Garp turns out to be such a loser. After 2 years of training, Garp has grown into a capable naval headquarters colonel. But if he wants to become a disciple of Garp, he has to be related to Marine, which means he belongs to Marine. It's not that Luo Yun wants to be a pirate, but he still has to consider joining Marine at the beginning. Thinking about it, Luo Yun suddenly laughed at himself. What was he thinking about? Even if he wanted to become a disciple, others would not accept him. Now it is certain that he needs to find a village. At least he needs to settle down first and then plan the next thing. It is impossible to sleep in the open air like this every day, eating one meal and not finishing the next. I need to change my name first. The name Luo Yun can no longer be used. It seems out of place in this world. What should I change my name to? After all, you can't be careless about your name. In future fights with those strong players, when people call for your name can't be bad. It must be loud and clear. It is best to reflect your own Sharingan characteristics. After thinking carefully for a while, Luo Yun finally came up with a full name that seemed good to him. Sass 2. Sass. D. Luo Yun, yes, I will use this surname from now on. I am Sass. D. Luo Yun of the D clan. The moon star is rare. In a world without industrial pollution, the sky would be clear at night, with a crescent moon hanging high in the night sky and stars twinkling all over the sky, as if a Milky Way was flowing through it. Luo Yun was thinking about the situation at the moment. Time passed quietly. The beggar's chicken placed in the fire was already cooked. The lois outside had been burned for too long and cracked, making a clicking sound. Luo Yun woke up with a start. When Luo Yun saw that the beggar's chicken had been prepared, his stomach, which had been hungry for a long time, immediately began to growl unsatisfactorily. He took the beggar's chicken out of the fire with a nearby branch, knocked open the yellow soil outside, and pushed away the pieces of lois. A stream of hot steam came out, followed by an extremely rich fragrance. Luo Yun's mouth watered when he smelled it hard. He didn't care so much, and didn't care whether it was hot or not. He just started peeling off the outer leaves, revealing the golden roast chicken, and the aroma was even stronger. Raising his hand to wipe the drool from the corner of his mouth, Luo Yun grabbed a chicken leg and tore it off with force. Oil and water dripped from the chicken leg. Luo Yun licked his tongue and opened his mouth to bite. Call out. A stone flew through the air and hit Luo Yun directly on the forehead. Luo Yun screamed in pain and almost threw the chicken drumstick out of his hand. Raising his hand to touch his red forehead, Luo Yun stood up angrily, looked around, and shouted, "Who is it? Who can sneak up on me? Get out of here. Call out." Another stone came, and Luo Yun was prepared now. He was so angry that he opened Sharingan directly, his eyes became red, and a round of black magatama rotated in his eyes. When Sharingan was turned on, the fast rocks slowed down several times in his eyes. Luo Yun lowered his head and bent down to avoid it, and the rocks smashed into the sparks behind him, sparking a cloud of sparks. Huh! The person hiding in the secret saw Luo Yun's eyes turning red and let out a cry of surprise. He was very shocked that Luo Yun's eyes could turn blood red. With Sharingan turned on, Luo Yun's vision improved rapidly, and he could spot a little ghost more than 10 meters away, hiding in the darkness behind a bunch of trees. Without thinking, Luo Yun raised his foot and kicked a branch under his feet in the direction of the kid. The kid hiding in the bushes saw that Luo Yun had discovered him and jumped out of the bushes. Only then did Lin Ping see the other person's appearance. He was a kid who was smaller than him. He was wearing a white top and dark blue pants. He used a white hemp rope as a belt to tie the pants. The most eye-catching thing was his rare short green hair. He was holding a piece of grass in his mouth and looking at him with an unruly and arrogant look. Green hair. Looking at the other person's green hair, Luo Yun was stunned for a moment, suddenly thought of something, and his pupils dilated. In the world of One Piece, the one with green hair who is most remembered is Zoro. Could it be that the kid in front of me is Zoro? No, wait. Zoro has green hair, but that doesn't mean he has green hair and is Zoro. Luo Yun shook his head, calming down his excited heart, and asked the other person's name first. When Zoro saw the boy in front of him, he shook his head in surprise, frowned in confusion, and shouted, "Hey, boy, who are you? Tell me your name." Luo Yun's eyes flashed and he shouted, "If you want others to state their names, shouldn't you state your own first?" Zoro thought for a while, and it seemed like the same thing. He coughed twice and said with a serious face, "I am Roronoa, the invincible fighter in the nearby villages." "Zoro, who are you?" It was really Zoro. Luo Yun was shocked. He didn't expect to actually meet Zoro when he was a child. This was such good luck. Suppressing the shock in his heart, Luo Yun also announced his name and said, "My name is Sass." Luo Yun, Roronoa. "Zoro, why did you attack me just now?" Hearing Luo Yun use the word, sneak attack, to describe what he had just done, Zoro seemed to be irritated and shouted, "That's not a sneak attack. I think you dare to stay in the mountain alone at night. I just want to test how strong you are. I thought you were quite weak, but I didn't expect you to have a pair of strange eyes." Yeah, Luo Yun expressed doubts, and suddenly found that Zoro's eyes had been scanning the chicken legs in his hand, and he touched his belly with his right hand. Lin Ping understood that he was attracted by the smell of his roast chicken. Luo Yun put away the Sharingan, turned around and sat down, and said to Zoro who was standing far away, "If you want to eat, come over together. I can't finish this roast chicken by myself." Zoro hesitated for a moment, but his growling stomach urged him to come over and sit opposite Luo Yun. "Come." Luo Yun raised his hand and threw the chicken leg to Zoro on the opposite side. Zoro caught it, smelled the fragrance of the chicken leg, and his stomach growled even more hungry. He grabbed the chicken leg and started to chew on it. Looking at Zoro eating chicken legs in front of him, at this time Zoro is far from the grown-up Haki. At this age, he is just a little boy. However, Zoro is still a child, which means that Luffy is also still a child. In addition, Zoro does not have a sword yet, which means that Zoro has not defeated Koshiro, the master of the sword path. It seems that the time when he traveled through time was still a long time before Luffy went to sea, which also meant that he had enough time to become stronger. Seeing Zoro eating so happily, Luo Yun's stomach growled. He tore off the other chicken leg and bit into it. The whole roast chicken weighing 4 to 5 kilograms was quickly eaten by the two of them. Fortunately, although the two of them have large appetites, they are still children after all. A whole roast chicken is enough for 2 people. Zoro touched his full belly, looked at the pile of bones at his feet, and said sheepishly, "Thank you for the roast chicken. I will give you one back then. It's just a roast chicken, not something expensive." Luo Yun waved his hand and said grandly. This made Zoro feel much better about Luo Yun. After a pause, Luo Yun continued, "Speaking of which, why are you in the mountains at this late hour?" Zoro raised his fist. "Kaido, I have defeated invincible opponents in my own village. I heard that there is a very powerful kendo master in the next village. I want to challenge him, but on the way there, I didn't pay attention to the time. Staying here for now." As he said that, Zoro turned his head away, not daring to look into Luo Yun's smiling eyes. "You shouldn't be lost, right?" "No, I just didn't pay attention to the time." Zoro, who was exposed, suddenly became angry and shouted, making Luo Yun slap her legs and burst into laughter. Zoro clenched his fists and wanted to hit the mocking Luo Yun in anger, but thinking that he had just eaten half a roast chicken, it would be a bad idea to hit him, so he could only snort, fold his arms and sit down depressedly. After laughing for a while, Luo Yun put away his smile and said, "The village you went to is called Shimotsuki village, right? You know too." "Yeah. This village is particularly famous among the surrounding villages because there is a very strong swordsman master there, and many nearby villagers send their children there to learn swordsmanship." What is famous for? Of course, Luo Yun made it up. He was hunted down by the villagers when he first arrived. How could he know this? He said that this was just to get closer to Zoro, and also laid the groundwork for what he did next. Hearing that Luo Yun, the kendo gym leader, was very powerful, Zoro gushed and said disdainfully, "Why is that so awesome? I just went to compete in the gym this time. Defeating that gym owner proves that I am the strongest." It seems that Zoro in the future will be strong, unwilling to admit defeat, and dare to fight since he was a child. So that's it. Luo Yun pretended to be surprised, and then invited, "Let's go together. If the master of the kendo gym is defeated by you, I will learn swordsmanship from him. If you are not him of." Before Luo Yun finished speaking, he was interrupted by Zoro, I must have won, and I will definitely defeat him. Luo Yun, you should change your teacher. I don't believe it. With your little arms and legs, how can you be my rival? He is well known in several nearby villages. Luo Yun pretended to look down on Zoro. Zoro is still a child and is so strong. What happened to Zoro? Luo Yun was furious. Seeing that Luo Yun looked down on him, he looked at Luo Yun angrily and said, "If you don't believe it, let's make a bet." Luo Yun's eyes flashed, and he was secretly happy. Children were children, and they fell into the trap so easily, but he still pretended to be hesitant before speaking. What kind of bet? Zoro still didn't know that he was falling into the trap set by Luo Yun, so he thought carefully about what bet to set. After thinking for a long time, Zoro finally thought of it and said, "In this way, if I defeat that Kendo gym leader, you have to call me Big Brother." Luo Yun said, "Then if you are not defeated and I win, what will you do?" "I won't lose. There's always a chance of anything happening. What if you lose?" "If I lose, then I will call you Big Brother." "Okay, it's a deal." High-fiving Zoro, Luo Yun showed a smile of success on his face. Zoro looked at Luo Yun and smiled. For some reason, he had a bad feeling in his heart, but he dismissed it in the blink of an eye. He would not lose, Luo Yun is doomed. The two chatted for a while, and they both felt sleepy at the end, so they slept like this all night leaning on tree roots. The next day, Luo Yun took Zoro down the mountain, and Zoro followed Luo Yun without any objection. In addition to the reason for yesterday's bet, there is another most important reason. He has been wandering in this mountain for 3 days. If he doesn't follow Luo Yun, he doesn't know how long he will continue to wander. On the way, Luo Yun didn't ask Zoro about the road. Zoro, who was a road nerd, asked him that he would never be able to reach Shimotsuki village. Luo Yun took Zoro down the other side of the mountain and came to a prosperous town at the foot of the mountain. Shimotsuki village has Koshiro's Kendo gym. The village should be quite famous. You can find out by asking around in town. In town. This is the largest town among several nearby villages. Today is the market day once a month. Many villagers from nearby villages come here to go to the market. The town is extremely busy. Every street is crowded with people, and almost every shop and stall along both sides of the street is crowded with people, making it a lively scene. Before going in, Luo Yun held Zoro's hand, which was a warning. "Zoro, after entering the town, no matter what happens, you have to follow me." Anyone who watches One Piece will know Zoro's road crazy attribute. The word, direction, does not exist in Zoro's dictionary. Not to mention that today is so lively and crowded, and it is easy to get separated if you are not careful. Luo Yun doesn't want to have to find this guy then. However, just a minute after Luo Yun and Zoro entered the town, Luo Yun stood alone at the entrance of the town, looking up and forgetting the sky, wanting to cry without tears. "It's so hard for me." Back to a minute ago, Luo Yun was walking inside with Zoro. There was a lot of traffic in the town, so naturally there were more people coming in and out at the entrance. As people crowded forward and walked forward, Luo Yun and Zoro could only push forward a little bit with the crowd. At first, Luo Yun was afraid that Zoro would get lost, so he looked back from time to time to see if Zoro was still there. After entering the town and walking forward for only a few dozen meters, he came across the first entrance. There was a vendor arguing with someone next to him. Luo Yun took a second look curiously. 2 eyes. It's really just 2 eyes. When he looked back, Zoro was no longer there, disappearing behind him. Standing at the end of the town, Luo Yun pulled his hair in annoyance, not because he was upset that Zoro had lost it, but because he actually believed that Zoro would not lose it. How could there be such a stupid person like him? Young, still too young. How can you believe that Zoro is a fool? If he could take the right path, there would be no such word as a fool in this world. Why? Sighing deeply, Luo Yun really felt like crying without tears at this moment. He was completely desperate for Zoro. Whatever you want, just throw it away. Isn't it just that Zoro is lost? No matter how big the problem is, it operates normally. Maybe you'll run into him if you wander around. It doesn't matter if you don't run into him. As much as this guy is causing trouble, he will run into him sooner or later. Thinking like this, the depression in Luo Yun's heart disappeared. He turned around and walked into the town again. Asking where Shimotsuki village was and how to get there was what he should do now. On the other side, Zoro was facing a dead-end alley, his face was livid, and he was yelling curses. That idiot Luo Yun can actually get lost. Luo Yun, who entered the town alone, did not go looking for a place to ask Shimotsuki village first. Instead, he squeezed in a crowded place and searched for the target. You are the one. Finally, my eyes fell on a fat man, walking on the street with an arrogant and domineering look on his face. He wore a big gold chain around his neck, and he almost had the words, "Get rich," written on his face. Kuoke pretended to walk over casually, and the moment he got close to the fat man, Luo Yun's Sharingan quickly opened, all movements slowed down in his eyes, his right hand reached out and retracted, and Sharingan closed. A series of actions were completed in seconds when Luo Yun and the fat man intertwined. It was so fast that no one noticed Luo Yun's behavior. Turning the intersection, Luo Yun had a smile on his face. He raised his hand and threw the money bag in his hand. It was heavy. He was indeed a nouveau riche. He had a lot of money when he went out. Sharingan is really convenient. Even though just one Magatama is already so powerful, it surpasses ordinary people's vision and insight. Even seemingly fast movements are only extremely slow in his eyes. As for using Sharingan to steal things, if the Uchiha family members of the Hokage knew about it, would they kill him from across the world? This is not a question Luo Yun is thinking about. After finding the best restaurant on this street, the two tall and thick waiters guarding the door saw that Luo Yun was a brat and was wearing rags, so they immediately stopped Luo Yun. When Luo Yun took out 2 silver coins from the bag and threw them to the two waiters immediately smiled and bowed their heads to welcome Luo Yun in. The usefulness of money is highlighted at this time. Money may not be everything, but without money nothing is impossible. No matter in any world, this principle must be followed. Luo Yun did not go to the lobby, but went straight to a private room on the 2nd floor. Just as he casually gave a huge tip of 2 silver coins, the waiters in the restaurant knew that the seemingly shabby child in front of him was actually a kid who ran away from home. The wealthy second generation who carry huge sums of money. Immediately, there was no way anyone dared to neglect. Each one of them served extremely hard and wanted to get 2 tips. 1 silver coin was enough for them to earn a month's salary. Luo Yun was not stingy, and rewarded several young and beautiful waiters with a silver coin each. Anyway, there was a lot of money in the suddenly rich bag, with dozens of silver coins and more than 10 gold coins. How much belly is worth? When Luo Yun came here, he didn't know the exchange rate for gold and silver coins in One Piece world. How could he find out clearly? But looking at the excitement of all the waiters, the exchange rate couldn't be much lower. Reaching out to summon the cleverest waitress among them, Luo Yun said, "Beautiful lady, please bring a portion of all the delicious food you have here." "Okay, sir." Being praised by Luo Yun for her beauty, the waitress smiled, thinking to herself that she didn't expect that this grown-up from a good family could really speak, and his tone was gentle, "But it's a pity that he is too young, otherwise I can do something for my sister." Luo Yun added, "By the way, sister, I have a family elder who teaches kendo in Shimotsuki village. On the way to visit, I was attacked by bandits. Now I am the only one left. I lost my way and walked all the way here. I would like to ask how to get to Shimotsuki village from this town." No wonder such a rich young man looked so miserable. It turned out that he was attacked by bandits. Suddenly, thinking that such a young boy was alone, the waitress was filled with sympathy. Next, I asked for directions and said, "Shimotsuki village is on the seaside to the southwest of the town. There is a main road directly out of the southwest of the town. Walk along the main road for about half a mile and you will see Shimotsuki village." "Okay, thank you sister." Next Luo Yun asked some other questions. What country is this? Where is the kingdom of Goa? Have you ever heard of Windmill Village? There is no marine base nearby. The waitress works in this kind of restaurant and usually listens to the conversations of customers from all over the world, so she knows a lot. Most of them can answer it. Except for Windmill Village, they have never heard of it, and the rest are more or less familiar with it. The great restaurant is not only the quality of service, but also the speed of serving food. After chatting for a while, all the dishes were served. When the waitress left, Luo Yun tipped her a silver coin, which made the waitress extremely happy and thanked her repeatedly. From this morning until noon, Luo Yun didn't eat anything in order to reach Shimotsuki village as soon as possible. Looking at the table full of food, Luo Yun's stomach immediately growled with hunger. He wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth and started eating immediately. However, even if Luo Yun ate and drank like crazy, it was impossible for him to finish all the dishes on the table. He was not a foodie like Luffy. Finally, a roasted chicken and a whole roasted lamb chop were packed away along with a few side dishes. When paying, I also got 2 bottles of good wine. Zoro is a complete alcoholic, never having fun without drinking, and he should have been drinking since he was a child. Carrying this bag of things, I walked out of the restaurant door. The sun in the sky was still fierce and high in the sky. It was noon now. If I set off at this time, I would be able to reach the dojo around evening, otherwise I would have to wait until tomorrow. But before we can set off, we need to find Zoro, the crazy guy. This town is either big or small, so finding someone is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Wandering on the street, Luo Yun searched for Zoro while muttering strangely to himself. What's going on? That guy Zoro has caused enough trouble to give Luffy a fight, why hasn't there been any movement yet? As the saying goes, Sao 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 has arrived. Luo Yun was muttering when he heard a burst of noise from behind, which was also mixed with curses and shouts of killing. Luo Yun turned around curiously and looked behind him. There was a chaos in the crowd. People rushed to escape in both directions. Among the separated crowds, he saw Zoro running desperately. Behind him, a group of people wearing gray GI uniforms were led by a strong man. Chasing Zoro. Stop! Don't run, stop! You fool, stop here, you dare to molest my woman. What? Luo Yun was shocked when he heard this. What the hell, Zoro, a straight man who has never been cold to women, actually molested a good woman. Zoro, you've changed. You have become such a beast. Luo Yun clutched her chest with a heartbroken look on her face. She didn't expect Zoro, a straight-faced man, to look like Sanji when he was a child. Zoro was being chased, not to mention how depressed he was. He was just doing it casually. Who knew that something like that would happen? If he had known it, he would not have done it. This town can't stay any longer, but what to do with that guy Luo Yun? We can't leave him alone. The scolding is getting closer and closer. If this continues, it won't take long for him to catch up. Forget it, let's run out and get rid of these guys first, and then sneak in to find Luo Yun. Suddenly Zoro's eyes lit up and he saw Luo Yun standing in the middle of the road in front of him. Zoro immediately waved and shouted. Luo Yun, I'm here. Luo Yun was watching the show of Zoro being chased. When Zoro shouted, Luo Yun's face darkened and he cursed Zoro for being a cheat. More than 10 people were chasing after him, and the crowd was so dark. Luo Yun turned around and ran away without even thinking. If he was caught up, he wouldn't be able to escape even with Sharingan. Without training, Sharingan has not been able to exert even 1/10 of its usefulness. If he had learned some physical skills or swordsmanship and cooperated with Sharingan, Luo Yun would have been absolutely sure to eliminate more than 10 people, but it was a pity that he did not. As soon as he turned around and ran away, Luo Yun immediately regretted why he was so stupid. Zoro just shouted without pointing at him. He turned around and ran away to tell everyone that he was Luo Yun, an accomplice of Zoro. This is completely a behavior where there is no silver 300 taels. Zoro had already caught up, and naturally those behind him also caught up, with the pursuers not far behind him. Okay, there are no accomplices yet, don't let these 2 brats go. Hearing the scolding coming from behind, Luo Yun cursed Zoro in his heart and sighed at the same time. He was the unreasonable disaster. Sighing, Luo Yun ran very fast, and his legs seemed to hit each other. He turned on the small electric motor and fled forward along the road. Stop, you 2 little wolves, stop for me. The shouts and curses kept coming from behind, and Luo Yun couldn't help but complain. When chasing someone, shouting, stand up, was invented by some idiot. If you say to stop, they will stop, so you still have to chase. Turning to look at Zoro beside him, Luo Yun suddenly felt heartbroken and said, Zoro, I really misjudged you. I didn't expect you to be such a person and be able to do such a thing. Zoro had a dark face and cursed angrily, Get out. I'm not that kind of person, stop slandering me here. It's not that I'm slandering you, Luo Yun said quickly, it's because these people are chasing you because you molested other women. If you didn't do such a thing, why would they be chasing you? Why would you run away? Zoro was speechless after being asked, and finally said something that he was too lazy to tell you, so he looked away from Luo Yun and ran away. It's so embarrassing. It was so embarrassing just now. Zoro felt ashamed and regretful at the same time. Seeing that Zoro didn't speak, Luo Yun advised, come on, it happened anyway, so what does it matter? You can't let me just say when I meet someone in the future, when I first met Zoro, he molested other girls and was hunted down. Zoro gritted his teeth and said angrily, once again, I didn't tease you. Seeing Luo Yun acting like this, it seemed that he really had this idea. Thinking that if Luo Yun really said this in the future, his reputation would be ruined, so Zoro had no choice but to tell the truth about what happened just now. The incident happened 10 minutes ago. Zoro was wandering the streets looking for Luo Yun, but everyone knew that Zoro was a notorious street nerd. He almost walked out of the town after wandering for a long time, but finally walked back. Get lost. While Zoro was wandering down the street when he was lost, he smelled the aroma of food from the vendors on both sides of the road and his stomach growled with hunger. Thinking that he would settle his stomach first and then go find Luo Yun, Zoro walked towards a restaurant. As a result, the restaurant saw Zoro dressed no better than a beggar and kicked him out without even letting Zoro in. At this time, a young girl passed by. Her pink skirt was caught on the stall next to her. Out of kindness, Zoro thought of helping the girl untie her skirt. Unexpectedly, the skirt was a little messy, and he used a lot of force to tear a big hole in the girl's skirt. The girl immediately screamed, beat Zoro with her bag, and shouted that she was a pervert. As a result, the man came. Seeing this scene, she became furious and led a group of boys to cut Zoro into pieces. Zoro ran away quickly. Then there is a series of things that happened when I met Luo Yun later. After hearing what happened, Luo Yun held his stomach and burst into laughter, which made his stomach hurt. Giving a thumbs up to Zoro, awesome, Zoro, you are really awesome. After saying that, he couldn't help but burst out laughing. If the pursuers weren't still behind him, Luo Yun would have wanted to sit on the ground and laugh. This was so funny. Zoro's face was already blackened into charcoal. He turned his head away and did not want to look at Luo Yun. He knew that Luo Yun would definitely be like this, so he had no intention of saying anything just now. After laughing for a while, Luo Yun said, okay, stop laughing, let's get rid of these followers and leave this town. Although Zoro and Luo Yun were only two children under 10 years old, their physical fitness was as good as that of adults. As they ran wildly, they took advantage of the crowds of people on the road to get rid of the people behind them at an intersection, leading them follow Zoro to the southwest of the town. This time Luo Yun was experienced and let Zoro walk in front the whole time. He took Zoro to the southwest of the town. Just like the waitress said, there was a big road. The two of them walked along the road in the direction of Shimotsuki village. On the way, Luo Yun gave Zoro the roasted chicken, roasted lamb chops, and 2 bottles of wine. Zoro, who had been hungry for a long time, ate happily. He drank one of the 2 bottles of wine, and Luo Yun drank one. For the sake of Luo Yun remembering to bring him things and wine, Zoro looked much better after drinking and eating, unlike just now, where he had a dark face and deliberately ignored Luo Yun. On the way, Luo Yun and Zoro met a carriage heading to Shimotsuki village. The driver was an old man. Seeing that Luo Yun and Zoro were also going to Shimotsuki village, they kindly gave them a ride. Originally, he arrived in the evening, but ended up arriving in the afternoon. After getting off the bus, Luo Yun thanked the old man and secretly stuffed a silver coin into the old man's clothes. Shimotsuki village is not a very big village. There is a stone engraved with the 3 characters, Shimotsuki village, standing at the entrance of the village. Luo Yun took a second look curiously, because the 3 characters, Shimotsuki village, on the stone did not look like the craftsman carved it bit by bit. It was as if someone had written on it with a sharp weapon. Zoro was overjoyed when he saw Shimotsuki village, and called Luo Yun to go into the village. First, He couldn't wait to defeat the master of the Shimotsuki village kendo gym, and second, he wanted Luo Yun to admit defeat and call him big brother. Shimotsuki village is not a very big village. There is only one street with houses built on both sides. There are almost 100 households in the whole village. The village is not big, so naturally every villager knows about such a large kendo gym. If they ask a random villager, he will give them directions. You guys are looking for a kendo gym. Judging from your age, you should be here to learn swordsmanship. The kendo gym is on the hillside behind the village. No, I'm here. Holding down Zoro, who was about to kick him out, Luo Yun said thank you to the villagers and then dragged Zoro towards the kendo gym. After not walking far, Luo Yun and Zoro came to what the villagers said was halfway up the hillside. There was only one building on the entire slope, the kendo hall. They came to the gate of the kendo hall. Hey. Before I even got close, I heard a burst of vigorous haying coming from inside. It seemed that the students inside were practicing their swordsmanship. There is a plaque hanging above the gate, with the 4 words, Yixin Daocheng, written on it. Before Luo Yun could do anything, Zoro couldn't hold it in any longer and walked inside, arrogantly kicking open the ajar door. He stood in the middle of the inner hall with his hands on his hips and shouted into the room. Is anyone here? Is anyone here? I'm here to play in the gym. If you are a good guy, come out with me to show off. Idiot. Luo Yun raised his hands and patted his face, not wanting to read any more. Fortunately, Koshiro was in there with a good temper. If it were another owner, you would have been beaten to death long ago for being so arrogant. Seeing no one replying inside, Zoro took a deep breath and was about to continue shouting when Koshiro, dressed in gray clothes and with eyes, walked out with a smile on his face. Looking down at Zoro, who made the bold statement, he smiled and said, he's actually here to play in the gym. It's really rare these days. 2 of them came at once. I'm not here to compete in the gym. Luo Yun quickly waved his hand and explained, I'm here to learn from his master. I heard that there is a very strong kendo gym owner in Shimotsuki village, and he's here to compete in the gym. Koshiro smiled and said, that's it, then please sit down for a while I solve the matter of playing in the gym in front of you, and I will talk to you in detail about apprenticeship and learning skills. Luo Yun nodded and sat down on the wooden pillar next to him to watch Zoro play. Because Zoro shouted to kick the gym, the sound of sword practice inside had stopped. Luo Yun squinted and saw a group of children similar to them at the entrance of the corridor behind Koshiro, looking out curiously and talking to each other. Snort. Seeing Luo Yun sitting aside, Zoro snorted coldly, crossed his arms and said confidently, don't underestimate me just because I'm a child. I'm unbeatable in the village next door. Okay then, I will accept your challenge. If I win, I'll take away your sign. What if we lose? Lost. If I lose, I will join your sect like him, become your disciple, and learn swordsmanship. With that said, Zoro raised his hand and pointed at Luo Yun, who was watching the show next to him. Koshiro laughed, then it's settled. In that case, it's up to you, Kuina. As he spoke, Koshiro suddenly shouted something to the back. The children who were looking out curiously were startled and fell to the ground. Only a girl wearing a white top and blue shorts with a serious face was seen. He walked out and glanced at the apprentice who fell to the ground next to him. The apprentice was so frightened that he put his hands on the ground and backed away quickly. Zoro was stunned for a moment when he saw that it was a girl. Feeling looked down upon, he looked up at Koshiro and said angrily, "What, aren't you here to be my opponent? You actually asked a girl to come, I don't want to fight with girls." Koshiro smiled slightly and explained, although Kuina is a girl, she is more powerful than adults in the dojo, although as her father, this is not appropriate for me to say. Zoro looked at Kuina, thought for a moment, and said, I know, then I will defeat her first, and then I will defeat you. Zoro, who is very strong and refuses to admit defeat, will face off against Kuina, who is also very strong and refuses to admit defeat. This battle will definitely be interesting. Since it is a gymnasium, it must be in front of all the apprentices. Several people came inside. The apprentices in the dojo were already sitting neatly cross-legged on the ground. Luo Yun was not used to sitting, so he stood beside him with his arms folded, leaning on the corner. Zoro came to the sword barrel next to him and asked Koshiro if he could take any wooden sword. The guy took out all 9 swords in it, holding 3 swords in each hand and holding 3 swords in his mouth. Seeing this scene, everyone present except Koshiro turned pale, and the man holding the sword acted like an idiot. Arrogant Kuina saw Zoro like this, her eyes were full of disdain. She thought she had some ability, but she didn't expect that he was a fool who couldn't even hold a sword. Salute like an altar. Koshiro looked up at the altar on the wall and bowed as he spoke. Kuina and Zoro also bowed at the same time. Zoro was holding 3 wooden swords in his mouth reluctantly. He dropped one when he bent down, and another one when he and Kuina bowed to each other. The apprentices watching the battle couldn't hold back their laughter when they saw this scene. If the owner Koshiro hadn't been there, he would have laughed loudly. Ha ha ha. The apprentices watching the battle laughed in low voices. They originally thought it was a fierce battle between evenly matched opponents, but they didn't expect that the person who came to kick the gym was an idiot who couldn't even hold a sword. Zoro simply ignored the ridicule from the people around him. The strong would not care about the weak's voice. After bowing to each other, Kuina pulled out the wooden sword from her waist, held the sword with both hands, and made a starting gesture with the sword tip facing upwards, while Zoro just held 6 wooden swords with both hands and bit the wooden sword in his mouth without making any move. The formula can be expressed. Seeing that Zoro looked like a newcomer, Kuina looked even more disdainful. It was simply an insult to compete with such a guy. Kuina's disdainful eyes met Zoro's strong eyes. Their eyes met in the air, and sparks seemed to collide invisibly. Suddenly, Kuina took action, stepped forward with his right foot, and slashed down with both hands upright, very fast. Zoro felt his vision go dark. He subconsciously held the wooden swords in both hands and crossed them in front of him. The wooden swords struck down. Not only was he fast, but he was also very powerful. With one strike, Zoro's wooden swords fell down. The sword landed on top of Zoro's head. Zoro screamed in pain and flew out, his hands and the wooden sword in his mouth flying out. Seeing this scene, the apprentices who were watching the battle had a look of contempt on their faces. This guy who claimed to be a gymnast was not much different from them. He had the guts to come to the gym with such strength. Koshiro's eyes were thoughtful. He could naturally tell that Zoro was a novice, but as a novice, he was able to react when Kuina made a move. This kid's reaction was very fast. Zoro, who was lying on the ground, looked at Kuina's arrogant eyes, unwillingness mixed with anger. Hateful. Cursing softly, Zoro grabbed 2 wooden swords and stood up from the ground. He held the swords in both hands and stood sideways. His body squatted slightly and leaned forward slightly. He held the sword in his right hand horizontally in front of him and his left hand held the sword tilted downward. This was another move, the most authentic double sword style. Both Kuina and Koshiro were startled by Zoro's movements. This skilled movement did not look like that of a novice who had never learned swordsmanship. Kuina couldn't help but asked, "Have you ever learned Nito Ryu swordsmanship?" "No way. Today is the first time I hold a sword," Zoro roared. First time. Koshiro smiled slightly. It was his first time holding a sword and he was able to do it so proficiently. It takes a long time for ordinary people to practice the double sword style. This child has a strong talent for swordsmanship. Seeing the disdain in Kuina's eyes, Zoro was very angry. He was very strong. If he wanted to become stronger in the future, how could he lose to such a woman? Thinking about this, Zoro shouted, rushed towards Kuina quickly, crossed his swords in front of him with both hands and stabbed Kuina. This seemingly powerful move had flaws everywhere in Kuina's eyes. She was indeed a novice. She didn't even move her feet. When Zoro approached, Kuina raised her sword and struck out. Bang! With one strike of the sword, Zoro was knocked away again and fell heavily to the ground. The 2 wooden swords in his hands flew out. Zoro fell to the ground with dizziness, and a clear long red mark appeared on his forehead, which was made by a wooden sword. The apprentices next to him felt pain when they saw it. If this sword hit them on the head, they would probably suffer the same fate. Why doesn't this idiot hide? Luo Yun raised his hand and slapped his forehead with a look of helplessness. He obviously didn't know how to use a sword and he was a novice, but he actually took the initiative to attack others without dodging. Isn't this an opportunity for others to expose their flaws? Watching Zoro fall to the ground, Koshiro raised his hand to declare victory. 1 point, that's it, Kuina wins. Kuina walked up to the dazed Zoro, stuck the sword upright in front of Zoro, and mocked, "This child is like a wild boar." "That's enough, Kuina." Seeing this scene, Koshiro frowned slightly and shouted to stop. As a winner, taunting the loser was against the spirit of a swordsman. Kuina was unmoved and still mocked, "You are obviously an amateur, but you want to play the double sword style. You are 10 years too early." Zoro had woken up at this time. Hearing the taunting words, he held the bamboo sword in his hand tightly and glared at Kuina with angry eyes. But Zoro didn't speak. Since he failed, it is the winner's right to mock the weak. "I will become stronger, and one day I will defeat you with the two-sword style that you look down on." Zoro secretly made up his mind. This prompted Zoro to embark on the path of swordsmanship and become a swordsman. For this woman who defeated and ridiculed her, and even later, for her, Zoro would go to sea just to defeat the swordsmen around the world and become the world's greatest swordsman. Swordsman, let her name ring through the heavens. Seeing the unwillingness and anger in Zoro's eyes, Kuina said, "Why, if you don't want to admit defeat, then get up and fight with me. If you lose, you lose. There is no need to compete again." Very simple and good. Kuina originally thought that Zoro would get up in anger and start another fight with her, but Zoro's surrender was unexpected, which made her look at Zoro a few times. Seeing that these two strong people were getting more and more angry, Koshiro interjected from the side, "If that's the case, then you have to." "I understand. In that case, I will join your sect. Do you have any objections?" It was Zoro who was so arrogant even after being defeated and joining someone else's sect. Koshiro was not angry, but smiled and said, "No problem." Kuina picked up the wooden sword in her hand and turned around to leave. Zoro suddenly raised his head and shouted, "I will practice hard and I will defeat you. Remember it. That won't happen one day." Kuina said lightly, turned and left. Many people who were defeated by her said this, but they were still defeated by her. Hateful. Seeing Kuina's disdain for him, Zoro punched the ground angrily. "Why?" Koshiro sighed, with a worried look on his face. This daughter was extremely talented in swordsmanship, but she could not change her arrogant and cold temperament. If this continued, it would be difficult for her to achieve much in the way of swordsmanship in the future. She would have to find someone to defeat her to make her restrain herself. But none of the people he has collected can compare to Kuina. If anything, this little guy is possible. He has good swordsmanship talent, a strong heart, and a character that refuses to admit defeat. He is a talent that can be made. Wait. Suddenly, Luo Yun, who was standing in the corner, called out to Kuina who was about to leave. Everyone present was stunned. Only then did someone notice Luo Yun standing in the corner and realize that there was such a person. From the moment he walked in, Luo Yun had just said one sentence. In addition, everyone was attracted by the arrogant Zoro, so they didn't pay much attention to Luo Yun for a while. Even Koshiro almost forgot about Luo Yun's existence. Only when Luo Yun spoke out did everyone notice him. Kuina stopped, turned to look at Luo Yun, raised the sword in her hand, and said arrogantly, "Why, you want to challenge me too?" "Yes." Luo Yun replied lightly, then walked forward, passing by Kuina, and came to Zoro's side. Hearing that Luo Yun also wanted to challenge Kuina, the apprentices below suddenly became curious and started talking. "Who is this guy? He dares to challenge Kuina." "I don't know, I just knew I came here with this kid. It sounds like I came here to learn from my teacher, why did I suddenly challenge Kuina?" Zoro was the most confused. He knew that Luo Yun was here to become a disciple and he had never thought of challenging him. Why did he suddenly have to duel with this woman? Walking up to Zoro, he gently picked up a fallen wooden sword from the ground and turned to look at Kuina. "Why? What why? Why challenge me? I remember you came here to become a disciple. Challenging me now means you are kicking the gym." Luo Yun did not answer Kuina immediately. He turned to look at Koshiro and asked, "What? Gym owner, you can't kick the gym." Koshiro was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "Of course. Thank you, host." With the same smile, Luo Yun then turned back to look at Kuina, who was frowning, and said calmly, "Originally, I came to be a disciple, but you defeated my younger brother and mocked him in front of him. He, the eldest brother, can't turn a blind eye. Brother. It was not only Kuina who was confused, but also Zoro. Zoro was stunned for a moment, and suddenly remembered the bet he made with Luo Yun, and his face immediately turned red with embarrassment. Are you his eldest brother? Kuina looked suspicious. Judging from his appearance and the name he just called, he didn't look like the eldest brother between these two people. It wasn't before, but it was just now. Speaking of which, I have to thank you. Kuina became more and more confused after hearing Luo Yun's words. Fortunately, she didn't care so much. She pulled out the wooden sword from her waist and pointed it at Luo Yun. In that case, I will accept your challenge. I hope you won't be as useless as this guy who fell to the ground. Hearing this, Zoro immediately felt unhappy. I even gave in and fell to the ground. I even got it on me. Forget it if you are unhappy, Luo Yun. Why did this guy take me with him? Kuina was indeed unhappy. Luo Yun's calm reply just now seemed to not put her in his eyes at all. This made Kuina feel very humiliated, so she would teach this arrogant guy a lesson. But she seemed to have forgotten that she was even more arrogant than Luo Yun. Salute like a shrine. Koshiro bowed towards the wall shrine. Luo Yun and Kuina put away their wooden swords and followed Koshiro in bowing. Salute to each other. Luo Yun bowed to Kuina, and Kuina bowed to Luo Yun at the same time. After the ceremony, Koshiro took 2 steps back, leaving a fighting position for the two of them. As for Zoro, he had been dragged down by the apprentice below, and the wooden sword on the ground was also picked up. Kuina pulled out the wooden sword from her waist and held the sword diagonally with both hands as she did against Zoro. Luo Yun also made the same move. Everyone was dumbfounded by Luo Yun's action. What the hell, this guy Luo Yun wants to do the same thing as this woman. Zoro muttered to himself. He thought Luo Yun would rush up like him, but he didn't expect that Luo Yun would just stand there with a sword. Only Koshiro seemed to see something. There was a trace of surprise in his eyes, and he nodded with satisfaction. Luo Yun did the same action as Kuina out of helplessness. Like Zoro, he didn't know any common sense about swordsmanship. There was no way he could hold a sword and place it casually like that idiot Zoro. So he just followed Kuina directly. Kuina has been learning kendo since she was a child, so she never has the wrong starting position. Koshiro also understood Luo Yun's point, and nodded with satisfaction. He knew his disadvantages, but was able to use methods to minimize them. Luo Yun may not have shown the same strong swordsmanship talent as Zoro, but he has shown strong fighting talents. Kuina was also shocked by Luo Yun's starting position. In a blink of an eye, she realized that Luo Yun was completely imitating himself. He had been lying for a long time and was lying about not knowing any kendo. His eyes became more and more disdainful. Luo Yun was naturally aware of Kuina's disdain and didn't pay much attention to it. In the original work, Kuina was a proud and cold girl, and few people could look into her eyes, except Zoro. Tick-tock tick. The clock placed on the wall moved little by little, but neither Kuina nor Luo Yun made any movement. They were doing the same starting position and staring at each other. Hey, what are these two people doing? It's been a minute, and neither of them made a move. How is this guy named Luo Yun so strong? Even Kuina was at a standstill. The apprentices below were talking quietly one by one. Kuina naturally heard it, and her face changed slightly. Especially when she heard these people say that she was stagnant, she became slightly angry. This was not to say that she was not as good as the guy in front of her. Thanks for watching, subscribe and support my channel.